On a quiet Sunday night in Villisca, Iowa, the gentle calm of the town was pierced not by a scream, but by a chilling silence. Curtains drawn tight over the windows. A single oil lamp turned down to a dim, haunting glow. Inside 508 East 2nd Street, 8 people lay utterly still. An axe, smeared and left behind, stood as a mute, terrible challenge to all who would come looking for answers. How could such horror have come to such an ordinary home? What had gone so wrong in the heart of this peaceful town? Let's turn the clock back. Who were the people inside this house whose lives were about to be forever changed by an unimaginable crime? The Moore family, led by Josiah B. Moore, aged 43, and his wife Sarah, 39, were respected members of the community. Their 4 children, Herman, 11, Mary Catherine, 10, Arthur, 7, and Paul, just 5, were described by neighbors as lively, polite, the picture of small-town innocence. That evening, the 9th of June, 1912, the family had invited 2 young guests, Lena Stillinger, 12, and her younger sister Ina, 8. The girls had joined the Moores for a local Presbyterian church event, Children's Day, a wholesome tradition in a close-knit, trusting community. It was, by all accounts, an unremarkable evening. Laughter and light, then a walk home beneath the soft Iowa stars. A routine night, in a town where everyone knew each other's names and doors were rarely locked. In a world like that, who could imagine such darkness would soon fall? But as the night deepened and the lamps flickered low, something evil crept into that small, wood-framed house. No one would hear the terrible events unfolding behind closed doors. And by morning, Villisca's innocence would be lost forever. What could turn a quiet family home into a crime scene that would haunt generations? The story begins here, on a still night, at 508 East 2nd Street. Cracks beneath the surface motive and signs. On the surface, Villisca in 1912 seemed a town untouched by conflict. But, as is often the case, beneath the layers of neighborly smiles and Sunday church gatherings, tensions quietly simmered. For Josiah Moore, head of the ill-fated family, business had not just been about profit. It was about pride, reputation, and, perhaps, rivalry. Josiah had once worked for Frank F. Jones, a prominent local businessman and politician. Their relationship soured, eventually ending in a bitter split. The townspeople whispered about commercial jealousy, about deals lost and resentments nursed. Was this merely small-town gossip? Or could such tensions truly fester into something darker? Sometimes, the most dangerous conflicts are the ones that grow in silence. Yet, in hindsight, the night of the 9th of June offers unsettling details that seem to hint at a carefully laid plan. The killer had not acted on a sudden impulse. The evidence left at the scene tells a different story. All the mirrors in the house had been covered, and the victims' faces draped with cloth, ritualistic, deliberate. The glass chimney of the oil lamp had been removed. The lamp wick twisted low to cast only the faintest light. In the kitchen, a basin of bloody water, untouched food left on the table, and most bizarrely, a slab of bacon, weighing nearly 4 pounds, placed beside the murder weapon. Was the killer sending a message, or simply disturbed? Even now, a century later, the detail of the bacon baffles investigators and visitors alike. And what about the rumors once so persistent of a discarded cigarette found in the attic, as if someone had waited and watched? Modern researchers have cast doubt on that claim, but the shadows of uncertainty linger. All these subtle, calculated acts, covering mirrors, hiding faces, tampering with the lamp, suggest one thing. Whoever entered the Moore house that night came prepared. The signs were there, if only someone had seen them. But in small towns, tragedy often arrives unannounced. Sometimes, the cracks beneath the surface are only visible after it's too late. The night of terror, a timeline unfolds. The evening of the 9th of June, 1912, began with all the hallmarks of small-town innocence. By 9:45 to 10 p.m., the Moore family and their young guests, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were making their way home from the church's Children's Day program. Their path was familiar, their pace unhurried. No one could have predicted that these would be the last peaceful moments they'd ever share. What happened after they entered the house at 508 East 2nd Street has become the subject of both fascination and horror for generations. The consensus among investigators is that sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., most likely between midnight and 2 a.m., an unknown figure slipped silently into the home, or perhaps emerged from a hiding place already within. There were no cries for help, no neighbors awakened by the chaos. Instead, the darkness inside was broken only by the dull thud of the axe. Most victims were struck as they slept, never given a chance to react. Josiah Moore, the father, appeared to suffer the brunt of the violence. His injuries more severe than the others, so severe, in fact, that marks from the axe embedded themselves in the ceiling above his bed. Morning brought the first flickers of suspicion. Around 7 a.m., neighbor Mary Peckham noticed the unusual quiet, the Moores' chores left undone, their house locked and lifeless. Her unease grew as repeated knocks went unanswered. Peckham soon called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore, who arrived to unlock the door. What he found inside would change the town forever. The Stillinger sisters, lifeless in the parlor. The Moore family, brutally attacked in their beds. Police Chief Hank Horton was summoned immediately. Yet even as the authorities arrived, word spread through Villisca like wildfire. In their shock and morbid curiosity, townsfolk streamed into the house, contaminating the scene, trampling evidence, and making the investigators' task almost impossible. It wasn't until nearly 10:30 a.m. that the National Guard finally secured the premises. In those chaotic morning hours, vital clues were lost. Footprints erased, fingerprints smudged, the scene forever compromised. The tragedy was compounded by confusion. What had happened in the darkness? Who could commit such horror and vanish into the silence of a waking town? The answers, it seemed, would be buried beneath layers of panic, gossip, and irreversible mistakes. The investigation begins. Witnesses, forensics, and the web of suspects. The morning after the murders, the town of Villisca became a stage for chaos and confusion. Investigators faced an uphill battle from the start. The crime scene had been flooded with curious locals, blurring the very evidence detectives needed. Yet, the investigation pressed forward, driven by a haunting question. Who could have committed such an act? First came the accounts of those who had made the initial discoveries. Neighbor Mary Peckham, unsettled by the family's silence, recounted how she had noticed the chores undone and the ominous quiet. Ross Moore, Josiah's brother, would never forget the horror that greeted him as he opened the door. Police Chief Hank Horton, summoned quickly to the scene, was met with a grim tableau. 8 lifeless bodies, order disturbed only by the violence visited upon them. Strikingly, no one reported hearing screams in the night. This detail, paired with the oil lamp dimmed low and victims caught in sleep, suggested a swift, calculated attack. It's a chilling reminder. Sometimes, evil moves in utter silence. Forensics in 1912 were rudimentary by today's standards. The medical examiner ruled that severe head trauma, delivered with the blunt end of the axe, was the cause of death for all victims. Lena Stillinger's posture suggested a possible assault, but examination yielded no conclusive proof. Another painful uncertainty in a case filled with shadows. With evidence so badly compromised, investigators turned to possible suspects. The list grew quickly, fueled by rumor and desperation. Reverend Lynn G.J. Kelly, a traveling minister with a troubled history and a penchant for erratic behavior, became a primary focus, especially after a confession wrung out during long hours of questioning, later recanted. Then there was Frank F. Jones, the prominent businessman, with his public feud against Josiah Moore. Whispers of a hired killer, William Blackie Mansfield, spread through town, yet Mansfield could provide proof he was elsewhere that night, and even sued the private detective who had accused him. Other names surfaced: Andrew Sawyer, a drifter obsessed with the murders, and Henry Lee Moore, a known axe murderer unconnected by physical evidence. But despite dozens of theories and mounting speculation, no one could tie any suspect to the scene. There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no irrefutable proof. As days turned into weeks, the case seemed to grow colder, haunted by the question: had Villisca's killer walked among them, unseen and untouched by justice? The twist: a pattern emerges and a theory takes shape. For months, the Villisca murders stood as an isolated horror, a singular tragedy that left a small Iowa town shattered. But as the investigation stagnated, a startling realization began to surface. This was not the first family to be targeted in such a brutal, ritualistic fashion. Suddenly, the Villisca case was no longer just a local mystery. It was part of something much larger and much darker. Investigators began to piece together reports of eerily similar attacks across the Midwest. Entire families slain in their beds, the killer, or killers, striking under the cover of night and vanishing without a trace. Towns like Colorado Springs, Monmouth, Ellsworth, and Paola had all been touched by the same silent terror. Again and again, detectives found the same chilling signature: the blunt side of an axe used as the weapon, oil lamp chimneys removed, the flame dimmed low, mirrors covered, faces draped, scenes left undisturbed except for the violence. In each case, robbery was ruled out, valuables left untouched, as if the crime itself was the only goal. This chilling pattern forced investigators to widen their search. Could a single, transient killer, perhaps one traveling by rail, be responsible for this string of unsolved crimes? The man from the train theory began to gain traction. Some, years later, would point to a mysterious figure named Paul Mueller, a name highlighted in the 2017 book by Bill James and his daughter Rachel. They argued that Mueller, an elusive serial killer, may have been the shadowy presence moving from town to town, leaving devastation in his wake. Yet, for all the academic weight this theory carries, it never delivered the closure the families and the people of Villisca so desperately needed. There was no concrete forensic evidence, no eyewitnesses who could positively identify the killer. The pattern offered an explanation, but not justice. As the investigation expanded beyond Iowa's borders, the focus on individual suspects faded. What remained was an even greater fear: that the person responsible for Villisca's darkest night might have been a ghostly figure, slipping between towns and years, forever just out of reach. In this way, the twist in the Villisca case wasn't just a new suspect. It was the chilling possibility that true evil could be both everywhere and nowhere at once. Trials and verdicts, a town without justice. As weeks turned to years, hope for a simple resolution faded. Yet, the search for justice demanded its rituals. In 1917, 5 years after the Villisca tragedy, the legal spotlight fell on a most unlikely suspect. Reverend Lynn G.J. Kelly, a wandering preacher known for his odd behavior and troubled mind. His arrest drew headlines across Iowa. At last, the people thought, the town might find some closure. But the path to justice proved as muddled as the crime scene itself. Reverend Kelly was subjected to grueling interrogations. After hours of relentless questioning, he gave a confession, only to later withdraw it, claiming coercion and confusion. The court struggled to decide what to believe, a broken man's words, or the stubborn absence of hard evidence. The first trial ended with a hung jury, no verdict, only exhaustion and more questions. In the retrial, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered its answer: not guilty. Reverend Kelly walked free, and with him walked Villisca's last faint hope for accountability. No one else would ever face trial for the murders at 508 East 2nd Street. Why did justice fail? The answers echo in the mistakes of those first critical hours. Evidence was trampled underfoot by crowds of shocked neighbors. Fingerprints, footprints, and vital clues, lost forever to curiosity and chaos. Prosecutors were left with little more than rumors and a confession that couldn't withstand the light of due process. Over a century later, the Villisca axe murders remain one of America's great unsolved crimes. The failure to convict anyone wasn't just a legal technicality. It was a wound that never healed. For the families, for the town, for all those drawn to the case, the verdict was a bitter one. Sometimes, in the darkest of tragedies, the truth slips away, and no courtroom can bring it back. And so, the little white house on 2nd Street would forever be a place haunted not only by what happened, but by what was never found. Aftermath, a legacy of unanswered questions. In the years that followed, the town of Villisca could never quite return to its former innocence. The house at 508 East 2nd Street, once filled with laughter and the ordinary rhythms of family life, became a symbol of something lost, a lingering shadow that stretched far beyond the borders of Iowa. For investigators, Villisca became a cautionary tale. The mishandling of the crime scene, those crucial early hours when evidence was destroyed, not preserved, would echo through law enforcement circles for generations. Textbooks would cite Villisca as a disaster in evidence management, a painful example of how public panic can overwhelm the search for truth. Police and prosecutors alike learned. A confession means little without physical proof, and an open door can erase decades of work in a single morning. But for the families of the victims, and for the people of Villisca, the wounds ran deeper. The loss of the Moore and Stillinger children left scars that no verdict or investigation could ever heal. The house itself became a sort of monument to unsolved tragedy. In 1994, it was restored and opened as a museum, drawing visitors from around the world, curiosity seekers, true crime enthusiasts, and those hoping, perhaps, to feel a trace of the past. Some came searching for ghosts, others for answers. The notoriety of the Villisca axe murders never faded. In 2014, a bizarre incident during a paranormal investigation at the house only added to its legend, reminding the world that some wounds become part of local mythology. Yet, beneath the layers of rumor, the real lesson endures. When forensic science is lost to confusion and memory overtakes evidence, the truth can become just another ghost in the attic. Today, the Villisca case stands as both a mystery and a warning. It asks us, how do we confront the unknown? And in the silence that follows tragedy, what do we choose to remember? Conclusion: what remains and what we learn. Over a century has passed since the night Villisca lost its sense of safety. The White House on 2nd Street still stands, its walls heavy with memory, a testament not only to tragedy, but to the lingering questions that have never truly faded. In a world obsessed with answers, the Villisca axe murders remain a stark reminder that some mysteries may never be solved. What is left, then, when justice is denied and truth grows hazy with time? The legacy of Villisca is not just a case file or a tourist attraction. It is a lesson, written in the cautionary lines of every forensic textbook and whispered through the halls of every police academy. The cost of mishandling evidence, the risk of jumping to conclusions, the danger of letting rumor outpace fact. For those who lost loved ones, the Moore and Stillinger families, the pain never had the balm of certainty. Their story became the town's story, a dark undercurrent beneath the surface of daily life. And for every investigator who has come since, Villisca is a challenge. Can we learn from the errors of the past, or are we doomed to repeat them? In the end, the house on 2nd Street is more than a scene of horror. It is a monument to memory and warning. The case inspired books, documentaries, and countless theories, but its most important lesson is quieter. It's a lesson about the fragility of truth and how easily it can be lost when fear and curiosity cloud our judgment. So as the sun sets over Villisca and another day passes into history, the story endures, a silent echo, reminding us that sometimes the answers we seek lie buried in the silence we helped create. The Villisca axe murders warn us, be careful what you forget, for in forgetting, we risk losing the truth forever. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more mysterious cases from history. Each case reminds us how easily the truth can slip through our fingers, and how important it is to keep searching for answers, even when the trail grows cold.